Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. No Laura again this week. Hopefully she will be with us next week. Hope everything's all right, Laura. We'll speak to you later. So we are today on Let's Talk, talking about everything macabre and sinister. We are looking at what makes us love the idea of anything sort of death, gore, horror. Everyone fascinated by the supernatural generally appreciates this more than normal people. And probably we've got partners out there who suffer us for wanting the dark and macabre, and they've probably been dragged around all sorts of haunted locations and horror films and scare attractions that other people go, oh, why are we watching this? Why are we doing this? Why aren't you normal? Sometimes I get, who likes this, honestly? And who better to talk to than Peter Laws, who I know is fascinated by this subject. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure everyone must do, Peter Laws is a research author and ordained Baptist minister. He writes a monthly column for the Fortean Times and the creator of the acclaimed Matt Hunter series of dark thriller novels. His non-fiction book, The Frighteners, explores why human culture enjoys the morbid, which I'll be going to later. But we're also going to be talking about his new podcast on YouTube called Creepy Cove. Now, it is fascinating and very darkly twisted. And it basically, if anyone ever tried to describe what Monty Python is about, they'd probably have the same sort of issues of going, well, it's sort of. So let's bring him in. So Peter, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So we are going to be talking about everything macabre. What makes us love the sinister and the supernatural? Why is it that whenever there's an option of anything normal and there's a slightly weird version, then automatically we go for the weird version? Everyone I know involved in the supernatural loves the slightly weird and the slightly out there. Yeah. And I'm gonna, if bear with me, and this is my opportunity to do voiceover. I'm going to read from this amazing book, which you might recognize.
Oh, that looks good.
It's a great cover. Because the opening of this sort of sums it up. Now, you're probably going, but for anyone who's not read this, I'm in Luton Airport, and the guy on security is rummaging around my bag. He keeps squeezing and prodding stuff, checking if my pants are ticking or if my toothpaste contains a nerve agent. He asked me where I'm off to. Finally, I've been hoping he would ask me that. And because I get punched in the air excited when anybody does, I beam at him and I say, oh, Chipper, I'm going on holiday. Yes, but where to? Mental drum roll. Transylvania. He drops a toothpaste, frowns, and eyes me up and down. Really? Yes. It's a real place? Of course it is. It's in Romania. You're going to Vampire Land. He tilts his hand on holiday. I want to slap my hands together like a sea lion. I'm staying in a spooky old Saxon village. It's going to be amazing. He does something next that I've seen other people do in this situation. He slowly glances at my wife, as if she'll explain this anomaly. It's not like he's found cocaine in my bag or a severed limb. He's not horrified by me. But what I can tell, he's confused. My wife shrugs. He likes morbid stuff, and he wanted to go since he was a kid. She looks apologetic. It's his 40th birthday present. Now, I can so relate to that. And there's probably a lot of people who, where would you want to go? Tenerife or Transylvania? Whoa, easy guess. So why this fascination on your half?
I think the simple answer is that I just am, and many other people are just fascinated by this stuff, and it's almost like you can't fully explain it, you just are. And also that some people just aren't. And so I've met people who have no interest in this sort of stuff and actually would find this sort of thing disturbing and shocking and morbid and something that we shouldn't do. And we see a clash, I think, between these two groups when it's really down to taste. And so some people will just not be interested in spooky things or horror things and will instantly dismiss the rest of us who are. But actually, if you look across history and you look across culture, you'll find that most cultures are naturally drawn to topics that are relevant to them. And that includes death, suffering, pain, and the possibility of an afterlife. And to not be interested in those topics, actually, I think is absurd. Like, to expect us as human beings to not be curious about what happens when we die is strange, because it's like 100% relevant to every single one of us. So when you look across culture, you'll see that people through art and literature and entertainment will find ways of dealing with this very relevant topic of death. And I've always been like that. I've just been like that since like birth, like as long as I can remember. And at school, there'd be people, like really into football or sports and stuff like that, which is fine. But that always kept the world small to me. Whereas if I was walking home from school and someone said, "Oh, I think that house, West House, it was called West House on the street over there, that's haunted," that wasn't only interesting. It totally turned the colors up of my entire life, because it made me think, wow, I'm living potentially in a kind of epic thin place between physical and supernatural. And that to me is exciting and interesting and scary and thrilling. And so it's kind of absurd, I think, to think that human beings wouldn't be drawn to that. And most of us are. Most people are fascinated by these things.
So I think absolutely in terms of the bigger global thing, but I'm just going to pull you back to that little haunted house, because I can relate to that. And again, this is all about me. In terms of that place. Now, is it the fact of getting into somewhere like that, or do you think it's actually something to do with popular culture? In as much as we may have seen a horror film, we might have seen a kind of movie with that kind of thing in, and you see that excitement of the kids going in, and even Scooby-Doo, honestly. And are we drawn to it because we've now got the ability to see our own haunted house, or right in our vicinity, in our neighborhood, we got witches in that house kind of thing? Or is it much deeper than that?
I think it's a combination of both. And so in some ways, it instantly brings excitement to your town. And so, an otherwise boring street can become effectively like a Hollywood set, because you think, gosh, the house down the road, there might be all sorts of things going on. And that instantly kind of makes your life more epic and cosmic. Some people find that attractive, and I just always have. But I do think there are deeper things as well going on. And I particularly, this is what I found interesting when I was researching The Frighteners, that I found that people who really loved horror films, and also people who were drawn to the supernatural, many of them could trace their fascination back, particularly with horror films, to when they were children or when they were young. And they would have experiences that were almost like kind of life-defining. When they were teenagers, they'd say, "Oh, I remember when I used to watch Hammer horror films with my granddad." Or I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a kind of VHS, and it terrified me, but I wanted to see more. And so loads of the people that I meet at kind of horror conventions, they can trace their fascination back to when they were kids. And so I think there's part of it, there's a nostalgia aspect that like I'm drawn to horror and the supernatural because in a weird way, I find them quite comforting topics. I find myself it transports me back to when I was in my early teens, or as a kid actually. But this is pre-mortgage, pre-stress, pre-hassles, and it takes you back to a time when all that was in the world was like the fascinating possibilities of what was out there. And so I've met others who have found great comfort in these topics, and they can sort of be stress relievers. But at the same time, people can also get encouragement from the topic of the supernatural on the basis of it. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but like if your house was haunted, like if I asked somebody the other day, like, what would you, if you could have 3 paranormal topics explained tomorrow and you would get them answered definitively: UFOs, Bigfoot, and sort of cryptozoology, and ghosts, which one would you choose? And a few of them picked UFOs, but most people, including me, picked ghosts. Because if I see a ghost, and if I get that absolutely guaranteed, that I'm told tomorrow that is absolutely true, ghosts really do exist, it makes my life a bit scarier in some ways when I go to bed at night and think what could happen. But it also makes my life filled with hope, because I think, gosh, maybe life isn't, just it. There is something after death. And I started doing Ouija boards and seances and breaking into abandoned places to hunt for ghosts when I was a teenager, long before I went to church, because I was on a kind of quest for evidence that maybe it's not just us, and that we don't just sort of die. And so I think there's lots of complicated reasons why people are fascinated by it. But to me, they're all normally always positive reasons. People are on a quest for adventure. enlightenment, fun. These are good things. And when I see people like on ghost hunts together, it's a usually, unless people are kind of falling out with one another and there's big arguments and stuff. Normally, it's a positive expression of humanity, and I want to celebrate that people should not feel ashamed for being drawn to these topics.
It would be quite a curious study to do, to see that, that moment, you see that seminal moment of a film that then created your fascination, whether in fact there was any kind of research that could be done to say whether it was a Hammer House of Horror, Count Dracula, then fascination about vampires and need to go off to Transylvania, or whether it was like Poltergeist or something that then drew you into ghost hunting, or whether it was Close Encounters of the Third Kind that drew people into ufology. I don't know what the one would strange beast would be, but there might be one.
Yeah, and I think you can do that with some people. You can trace it back to certain kind of cultural expressions of the paranormal, and they'll say, "Oh, that's when I started to get attracted to it." But equally, and I interviewed Alan Murdy for the chapter on ghosts, and he said, for some people, they just get interested in the paranormal simply because they haven't been interested in it up to a certain point. And then something completely anomalous happens in their life, and it kind of blindsides them, and they think, "Holy crap! I think I saw a ghost last night." And their interest is to try and work out what happened and to try to explain it. So not everybody is into the paranormal because they loved it when they were kids, but I find that quite a lot of people are, because maybe paranormal interested people are open-minded, creative thinkers, and get excited at the possibility of a blank page and say, you know what, maybe this is true, maybe that's true. Whereas I meet other people. Oh, you just went black for a second there.
All right, and you froze for just a second.
But yeah, so there's lots of different reasons, but at the bottom line, I still think it's healthy and it's normal and expected. And what I find sad is that so many other people who are kind of in the church or are Christians see this type of interest as the opposite, as demonic or evil or dangerous, and try to expect people to just sort of switch their interests off, which is crazy. It's like, when you hear of some Christians who'll say to somebody who's gay, and they'll say, "Well, you can't be gay, so you've got to stop being gay." And it's like, hello, this is who I am. Just celebrate that, please. It's the same in some ways, to a lesser extent, perhaps, like paranormal interest and being a spooky kid. If a church comes along and says, "Oh, well, now you're a Christian, you're obviously going to have to stop being interested in those things." And it's like, you really think that's possible? Ironically, it was my interest in the paranormal and in horror films that got me interested in spirituality, because previously I was really anti-church. I was really antagonistic about Christians in particular. I was in a band at school called Creatures of the Night, and then we called ourselves Tantalum, and I wrote songs about spitting on the Bible and God being an idiot, and all the sort of classic Jesus sucks. That's because I was very annoyed by Christians, because I felt they wanted to box me in and deny my interests in these legitimate subjects like this.
So I want to go personal, if that's all right, because I'm going to keep referring back to this book, but there was a section here when you talked about at university when you were in the horror films, and it was one of the Christian groups that then sort of pulled you away. So can I ask, why were you so angry?
Well, I was angry because I was always a fan of the film and the book by Ira Levin, The Stepford Wives, which was more of a kind of feminist film, which was about how society was trying to mold women to be a certain type of person, cook and clean, and that's not necessarily what all women want to do. Like they want to be themselves. And I found that Christians wanted, the ones I met at least, I felt that they wanted to make me become a certain type of person. And I thought, well, that's not who I am. And that angered me, because I was thinking, if God does exist, don't you think he's kind of willing to be creative and makes people in a certain way? And why should I suddenly stop watching 18 certificate films and only listen to music that have major chords in them? Why are you turning me into someone I'm not? And I riled against that. But I think it was then I started to meet some Christians at university that actually were a bit more chilled out and had a more nuanced view, I think, of God, and that made a big difference to me. But my quest, like I say, for spirituality started because I was watching films like The Exorcist that were hinting to me that maybe, like, what happens if there's something beyond death? And horror was the only genre that was taking the supernatural seriously, whereas Christians were telling me, don't watch horror because it's dangerous. Don't watch The Exorcist because it's blasphemous. And then I discovered The Exorcist was banned in Tunisia on the basis of it being Christian propaganda, because it's so pro religion in a sense. Yeah. Like the clergy actually are not just weirdo pedos in that. They actually are the answer, the heroes. There's not many films you can watch where that happens. So horror films, I think, are surprisingly Christian or religious type of genre.
I was going to say there was an element of then truth when you suddenly realize there are such opposing opinions across the world, across cultures. You suddenly realize that maybe the thing in the middle is being completely misrepresented, and then you realize that there might be something in that needs further investigation.
Yes, yeah, quite possibly. And I think the older I get, the more I've always been a kind of open-minded type of bloke. And then when I became a Christian, I start, oh, hang on, is the church going to sort of try and make me into a certain type of person? But as I've grown older, I just have realized I could just be me. And I think the book, The Frighteners, the bit at the beginning where the book's dedicated to my children, and it just says, be yourself, be you. And I'd say that to anyone watching this, be who you are, no matter what that is, but including your interest in spooky things, because it can be surprisingly isolating and lonely, I think, this type of interest, particularly in the days before internet connections like this. But you can feel like you're a freak. Or an example would be, you could be driving in your car and you witness a car accident, and you want to look at it. Perhaps not everyone does, but a lot of people do. And you'll start thinking, crap, there's something wrong with me. Why would I be celebrating and kind of glorying in somebody's accident? But the argument I make in the book is to say, no, actually what's going on there is your brain is hungry for information. It's trying to survive. And if it sees an accident, it wants to know as much data as it can so that it will avoid an accident itself. And so it's actually quite normal for us to be interested in these topics because we want to survive. It's like Stephen King when he was accused once of being a freak because he kept a scrapbook of the crimes of the notorious serial killer Charlie Starkweather. And somebody asked him, well, do you do that? Are you doing that because you like enjoy his crimes or something? And Stephen King says, no, not really. I'm fascinated by them, but ultimately I want to know what a person like that looks like and acts like. So if I ever meet one, I can run away. It's like there's like an educational aspect in trying to learn things, and a comfort aspect. Like how I write. Yeah.
So do you find, though, that as a Baptist minister, that other people then prejudge you? So just like if I ever told I'm a scientist, I get sometimes spiritual mediums coming instantly, well, you obviously don't believe anything because you're a scientist. What do you know? Do you get the same, that label then goes right across your head, and then people then judge what you're going to say?
Oh, Jonathan, yeah, I get that all the time. I get it in a small way. I get it when you're in a conversation, like you're out at the pub with someone, in the olden days, and you would be chatting, and nobody knows that you've been ordained or you're a Christian, and then it comes out in conversation, and then you'll see people like backtracking and saying, "I'm so sorry, I swore before," or "Oh goodness, you probably won't want to hear this story, but I'll tell these guys instead of you because you might be offended." And there's an assumption that I'm going to be upset at pretty much everything everyone says, especially if it's about God, and they'll think that I'm kind of get freaked out by blasphemy and that sort of stuff. But I'm notoriously hard to offend. I get offended by things that are normal to be offended by, bullying and prejudice and all the normal stuff, the stuff that Jesus got offended by. But like a couple of weeks ago, there's a Netflix film been announced about a story of Jesus where Jesus will be portrayed perhaps as a kind of lesbian woman, and people are freaking out about this. I just don't see the big deal. Like, it doesn't. What's the big deal? It doesn't matter to me.
So the whole Last Temptation of Christ film, that kind of thing.
I thought that was a great film. I thought that was a really interesting film, and I think that the job of art is to take the things which are interesting or important to us as a culture and pull them apart and look at them from all angles. It doesn't mean that it's always kind of offensive. So yeah, I don't really get that offended, but people think I'm going to be offended, and so sometimes I kind of go incognito just so people can treat me like a normal person, because I am a normal person. We all are normal, I think.
Relatively normal.
Yeah, most.
Relative is the thing. So in terms of, though, I've got to touch on the fact of the necromancer. Obviously, the issues of, in terms of biblical script, necromancer and Christianity just generally don't get on that well. Yeah. So in terms of, then you must meet a lot of people that would come under the classification of necromancer. How do you handle that conflict?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's things like for me personally, for example, like I used to do Ouija boards and all that sort of stuff on my kind of quest to discover life after death. When I became a Christian, I did stop doing that sort of thing, but I just stopped that because that wasn't kind of my area anymore. I'm still interested in it, but I don't think that means, therefore, that I can write off everybody's expression of spirituality. And particularly if you look at the Bible itself, I think people unfairly read the Bible as if it's a kind of modern textbook or a scientific textbook, and that every single thing applies to us at all times, which is just simply not true. You'll find some hardcore evangelicals who will say, every single verse we have to apply, but that breaks down when you realize that some verses contradict other verses. And some people will, applying a modern mindset, will think, that means the Bible doesn't make sense. And you're like, no, hang on. The Bible is not a historical scientific textbook where it's a collection of different literature from ancient writers who often told history in the forms of story. But inside the Bible is this interesting character called Jesus, this man called Jesus, which makes the big difference. So there's plenty of bits in the Old Testament that we don't apply today. You don't stone people, or wife's on a period, you don't avoid her for like 7 days, and all this sort of ancient law. We eat shellfish and that sort of stuff, and some of the stuff about necromancy is in there, but I don't know a lot about it, to be honest. So, and like I say, I don't do it personally, but I'm not gonna write off someone who comes into my life and says they're a kind of psychic medium or something, and I'm going to say, well, go away, Satan. In the same way as I wouldn't do that to someone who is a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Satanist or an atheist. I kind of, this is going to sound very Oprah Winfrey. I kind of feel like we're all on this sort of journey trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And I'm keen to learn from others rather than sort of insist other people be like me.
I mean, that's a great philosophy, isn't it? The fact that we're on the journey and we're going to learn from each other, not just assume, right, what am I going to do? You are in my life because I might learn from you. Yeah.
And that's always been my attitude. But some people would find that really dodgy, and I've had experiences before where, like, I've been interviewed on a Christian radio station once, where I could tell the presenter was not happy with my stance and my interests in the macabre. And then afterwards, it turned out that I knew the producer, and the producer said, "Oh, did you know that presenter sent round like a round robin of emails to all of her friends, including me," this producer, "and it asked us all to pray for protection that day because she knew you were coming in, and she felt that you would probably be bringing some sort of demonic presence, and that you might be sort of possessed by the devil or whatever, and so she was a bit scared when you turned up." And I've seen this before. When I was training to be a minister, somebody came in with some tarot cards, and they weren't like reading tarot cards, but this lecturer was saying, if you look at the designs on tarot cards, there's actually quite a lot of interesting Christian symbolism in them. And you can use tarot cards to kind of tell the sort of the Christian story. If you sat with someone with a tarot card, have you spotted this, spotted that? And he started dishing out these tarot cards for these trainee ministers to see these symbols. And I picked one up and I'm like, oh, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. But I would say about 70% of the trainee ministers were like this, get that away from me. Like they were nervous because they thought the cards themselves had an inherent demonic power. And I see this with Halloween. I know Christians who will avoid the novelty fang aisle when it comes to Halloween because they'll think like the devil is there ready to kind of attack. Whereas I'm just a bit more kind of chilled out, and some people would be frustrated with that, but I'm just being me. I'm not going to try and be someone I'm not. I'm not like a turn or burn type of person.
What I want to do, I want to move on to your podcasts, and I think probably if I just play this video,
oh yeah, cool.
It will probably just explain a lot. Right, I'll play this video.
Oh, hello. Hiya. I'm Peter Laws. I'm the minister up at Creepy Cove Community Church. You don't know about it? Oh, okay, right. Well, you're in Creepy Cove, right? Creepy Cove is the mysterious haunted fishing town by the sea where all horror movies actually happened. And yeah, I'm Peter Laws. I'm the minister of the church, Creepy Cove Community Church, which is up. Why are you here, by the way? Which is up on the peak of the cliff and overlooks the town. I'm just on my way there to prepare for the next service. Yeah, if you're not aware, the church has started to broadcast their church services, a kind of mixture of horror and spirituality. If you fancy checking it out, then go to creepycove.com and or subscribe through all the different places, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Ask Alexa if you want. But yeah, we're everywhere. So check us out. But for now, I'm really going to keep going because you're not supposed to hang out in these woods too long because there's things around when it gets a bit dark. So I better keep moving. Anyway, yeah. Bye. I don't know why you're here, but bye. Creepycove.com. See ya.
I didn't realise how long the ending was. I was dancing away there. Yeah. So, first of all, I love in the 80s electro pop music.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah. Worked hard on that.
Maybe it's not 80s, but it feels like 80s.
No, it's supposed to be.
Yeah. What made you think of this?
Well, yes. In lockdown, at the beginning of lockdown, I'd just come to the end of. I'd finished a book a little while ago, and the new book came out during lockdown, and I was thinking about what my next project should be, whether it's a new book or something else. And around that time, I was noticing that because everyone was kind of isolating at home, people who go to church were having church services at home because they were watching their church on YouTube or through podcasts or whatever. And I watched some of those and found it actually be quite a meaningful thing. And so I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, like, what happens if somebody if you can go to church from your couch, then what happens if you went to a church at a place that's really interesting? And so I thought, well, what happens if you just made a church up, which took place in a haunted, mysterious fishing town called Creepy Cove, where all horror movies actually happened? And if you would just imagine that they started broadcasting their services every 2 weeks, and would people be interested in that? And so I started to design this podcast, and I made it, and I started it during, about 2 months ago or so, and people seem to be getting really into it. It's wild, but I'm really delighted. And each episode is like a church service. It's got music like Gothic hymns and prayer and meditation and a sermon. And notices and appearances from horror characters. But the idea of it is to be either just comedy or pure entertainment. but also a kind of spiritual safe space to explore kind of a bit of a meditative encouragement, chill out. It's a weird fusion of the sort of stuff I like. And I've been amazed at how people have responded to it. I'm getting messages from all around the world of people, particularly who aren't Christians, they're atheists, and they've contacted me and said, I'm not into church at all, but this is now my regular sort of church on a Sunday. I'm going to go to this. So it's pretty crazy, but I've been really encouraged to see it's helped people.
It is slightly anarchic, I'll admit.
Yes.
There were sections that I thought, how can I both put this politely? People of a certain age would get, and I thought other people were never going to get that reference.
Oh yeah,
and other people would. So I'm sharing at the moment the podcast on the creepycove.com website. And there's one section I thought, that sounds very Kenny Everett. Again, there might be people that just go, who? And there's other people go, oh yeah. But if you
this
listen to I'm going to play a little
of the
bit.
Creepy Cove community podcast.
I think we can talk over this.
Can I just thank you for all the encouraging messages from so many of you from around
the very edge of a windswept cliff? Here, we overlook the notorious community of Creepy Cove, a haunted, mysterious fishing town by the sea. It is a place where every horror movie actually happened. We have served the spiritual and spooky needs of the Cove for centuries, but now we invite you, our special friend, to join us. So come on in, shake off the rain, because the After Dark service is about to begin. This is Creepy Cove Community Church. We bid you welcome.
And it carries on.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to find the moment.
To you all. Hello, it's a good night to have you back here for another After Dark service here at Creepy Cove Community Church. Sorry, I just got the urge to do that. May I encourage you, if you enjoy your experience.
I'm going to have to stop, otherwise I will end up listening to the whole thing again. So it's very funny.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad you found that. It's supposed to be this mixture of kind of comedy. But the idea is you pop your headphones in or whatever, and you feel like you're actually attending this church. And also linked to that is a Patreon program that we have, but also like the social media feeds. And so I'll be posting things like, lost property, or the toilets aren't working in the church or whatever. And people just like this idea of attending a fictional church in a kind of spooky Hammer horror style place. And at one point, like in the first episode, we had Carrie White from the Stephen King film Carrie. She came in and she was excited about her school prom that was coming up that weekend, and the congregation prayed for her. But we kind of live tweeted her on the Friday because before she went to the prom, and so people are talking. It's just me on Twitter pretending to be Carrie, and everyone knows that. But it was quite profound because I had people who were being bullied at school talking to the fictional Carrie and sending messages saying I can't believe I'm sitting here crying because I feel like Carrie understands the pain I'm going through. And it's this bizarre fusion of kind of blended storytelling. But people...
I was going to say, right, can I just clarify, are you doing all the voices?
Yeah. I'm no actor, right? So I can't act, right? But
there's a lot of voices.
Yeah, I know. I do. The only voice I don't do is
Frida?
I do all. So I do the narrator at the beginning, which we just heard. He's an American atheist friend of mine who presents a podcast. And so he did the narration. So he's a real American. But the rest of them are just me. But only not because I'm an actor by any stretch, but I realized it was lockdown. I didn't have anyone else to ask, and I didn't want to pay.
The production values are amazing. There are so many different voices, so many layers, and this background track and everything. And then there was this. Yeah. I was trying to find the bit I couldn't. Again, when it was the Kenny Everett bit when he goes communion, and it was that was straight out Kenny Everett.
Yeah,
I have to ask. And the funny bit was about Frida Kruger. And the warning saying, "Can you stay away from the cables because you'll cut
the wire."
little things like that. But I have to ask about the shark exorcism.
Oh yeah, so we had a shark exorcism at the church, and that was connected with a film called Shark Exorcist, and there's a Patreon program. So the Creepy Cove podcast is free, but people who want to get more content, they become patrons, and they get access to a weekly but members only podcast from me, which is about like the paranormal and strange news and reviews. And that comes out on a Tuesday and a Thursday. But they also, on certain levels of the Patreon program, will get bonus content. And so like last week we put out a full shark exorcism where, you know, it's like an audio drama. You go down the beach and they exorcise this demonically possessed shark. It's obviously it's absurd and it's stupid, but it's
I do want to ask, how does a demonically possessed shark manifest itself
as a shark?
How's the signs of an possession in a shark?
Well, in this, the shark was absolutely colossal, but the risk is that it didn't go well. And Father Michael, who was trying to exorcise this shark, sadly was lost in the sea. And so the shark is still out there in Creepy Cove at the moment. And so they've been warning the congregation to be careful, because this shark, because it's demonically possessed, doesn't only appear in the sea, but anywhere where there's water. So in your bath, or maybe even when you're walking in the rain, this demonically possessed shark could be there. So obviously this stuff is completely absurd, but at the heart of it, it's supposed to encourage people. So the messages in this show is to say to people, life is stressful, have some moment to just sort of be reminded that you are amazing people and you are good people, and you are loved and valued. That's kind of the point of the show, for fun, but for people to be encouraged. It's not some sort of weird Christian thing where it's let's act all like we're into the horror thing and then we'll convert them at the end. That's just not what it's supposed to be.
I mean, your sermon, because when you were describing that, you said there was a sermon and Gothic songs. I thought, it's a lot lighter than that, because your sermon is very uplifting. It's just a very uplifting, positive.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Chat, really. It's very lightweight. I don't think it's a Bible bashing sermon.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And then woven with these bizarre characters. What are these characters going to do next? I worry for them. It's very immersive. I feel very concerned. I can understand why people would tweet, because you suddenly feel very concerned about this congregation.
Well, yeah, the idea is to kind of build up this world, and so in time, like for example, the church administrator called Rupert Donk, he wrote a book about the supernatural history of Creepy Cove, and I'll probably write that book together, and that will come out, and people can read the history of that place, and you kind of increase the world of it. But of course, they're just sometimes the characters are real characters from films. For example, the one I'm recording today has got Jeff Goldblum in from The Fly, the 1986 movie where a guy turns into a fly, and that is both comedy, but it's also trying to help people who are going through physical illness and maybe been given a bad diagnosis, and it's using the absurdity of horror and the supernatural to connect with people in a real way and to try and encourage them. But yeah, it's nuts, but it's good. And also I haven't had a chance to do music for a while. I used to be in bands, and I kind of toured with bands for a while, and I haven't sort of written songs for quite a bit. So it's been fun to each week to write and record a song, like a bizarre sort of worshipy church song that's about monsters.
Could your old band, could they make a guest spot?
Well, I suppose they could, yeah. If I could gather them, yeah. Oh, yeah. I could bring them back. Why not? Yeah. But this Saturday, the next service is out, and that's where it's a children's special service, and so there's a Stephen King film called Children of the Corn, and so the Children of the Corn choir will be joining us to sing about how they've decided to stop killing all the adults. So there's a lot of references to horror, and that's some of the things I worry about. I think, well, not everyone's going to get this, and do I need to explain it more? But on the whole, the people who love horror seem to like getting it.
So I'm just putting up on the screen the ability so people could see on the creepycove.com website. There are all the current release of the podcasts out there, and obviously you can catch this on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I believe there's more. I'll click them all.
Yeah,
so people can
all of those places. Yeah,
lots and lots of them. it's incredibly immersive, and I do recommend that people go and look at it, because I was gripped very, very quickly.
Oh, well,
I
I'm
was
glad.
slightly scared at how absorbed I became. And also, I'm going to pull up your own website, the Peter
Oh, yes.
Rules website, because obviously it starts with the talking about. I didn't see your website. So not only does it, of course, deal with the Creepy Cove Community Church podcast, but also very handsome picture. But your books. So let's talk about those. Why did you start writing that series?
That was because it was when I was actually still in post as a minister, because these days I do all this creative stuff now mainly, so I don't look after a church, as it were, even though I'm ordained and all that. I do speak at churches here and there, but I do all this other stuff now mainly. But when I was in post as a minister, I was kind of walking through a field one day, and an idea came for a book, and I thought I'd go back and start writing it, and eventually that became a novel, and then I pitched that to agents and got lots and lots of rejection. It was quite miserable for like a few years. I got rejection after rejection, and then suddenly I got a 2-book deal for fiction, and then a non-fiction deal. So yeah, so that my novel series follows a guy called my novel series explore the clash of worldviews between those who believe in the paranormal and the supernatural and religion, and those who totally don't believe in it. And that second book, Unleashed, is probably my most personal novel, and that explores a poltergeist that happens in a town in a suburb of London. And that book was quite personal because that's based on an experience that I had with me and my friends as a teenager, where we saw some sort of strange apparition, half animal, half human thing standing on the top of an old abandoned asylum that we broke into. And that always stayed with me. And so the books explore the supernatural, but the main character is a staunch atheist and doesn't believe there is such a thing as the supernatural. He's an ex-church minister turned atheist professor.
And what are your plans for the character? Is he going to develop it? Is he back for more, or
I hope so.
Taking over.
Yeah, I'd like to write more, but I'm not really sure exactly what his next adventure will be, because I'm doing this Creepy Cove thing for a while. But like the latest book that came out, which is called Possessed, was exploring demonic possession. And so in this book, he is presented with a blood-soaked man who has scored the name of a kind of ancient Babylonian demon into his stomach, and the claim is that this guy has been driven to murder because he's possessed. But Matt Hunter comes along and says there's no such thing as possession. This is ridiculous. But that book explores an interesting explosion recently of people who've been asking for possession. Sorry, not asking for possession. Asking for, can I have a possession, please? No. A growth in people asking for exorcism. Like in the last few years, exorcisms, both in church but also in the kind of independent exorcism scene, the demand for that has risen. More and more people asking for it.
Yeah, I've also heard this. But I thought perhaps it was focusing on the Catholic Church. So, is it cross denomination in terms of exorcism?
Yeah, it is, and it's also not only within even Christian circles, but also in sort of certain like supernatural circles. You'll see there's a kind of more of a movement of not just investigating the spirits of a house, but it's like we must cleanse this house from these demonic spirits. And a lot of that is fueled by Hollywood, in the sense that, like I said about horror being quite Christian, sometimes horror can be like Christian propaganda and be overtly Christian, and can basically keep saying the supernatural is evil, it's always evil. But there's been this growth in people asking for exorcism. And in the book, Matt Hunter, because he's a rationalist, he has his reasonings why this has happened. It has nothing to do with people suddenly being just like, it's like the devil is more in the march. Some Christians would say there's more demonic possession today because we've allowed gay marriage, or we've stopped stopped prayer in schools. Oh, we've turned away from God, and so the devil is rampant. These sorts of things that I totally don't agree with, by the way. But those are the reasons why I'll think the devil is more prevalent. Whereas I tend to agree more with Matt Hunter that it's more to do with the stigma around mental health. And there is such a stigma around being labeled with a mental health label like schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever. For some people, particularly of a religious persuasion, that is such a they take the blame for that for some reason. We have a horrible blame culture where we'll say, well, I guess if I've got depression, that means it's my fault and I've brought this on myself, or it's my brain, the chemicals on my brain causing this. And for some people, that's a heavy load to bear. But when a religious system comes along and says, that's nothing to do with your brain, it's actually a foreign invader. You're perfectly fine, but this foreign invader has come in and is causing you to think these dysfunctional thoughts, or whatever you want to call it. For some people, that's quite attractive. And so, especially when they're offered an exorcism ritual that can get rid of this thing. So for some people, they prefer to be labeled demonically possessed than to be labeled bipolar. And to me, that's just that's so tragic. And it speaks of the shocking stigma we still have around mental health, because there's no one to blame. If you've got depression or whatever, you're not to blame. It's just how it is. It's how your brain is at that time. It's not your fault. But we're always looking to blame people. And so we blame the devil. That's not to say I'm against the possibility of there being, demonic activity in the world. But so many people have been misdiagnosed. People with epilepsy, people with alien hand syndrome, people with Tourette syndrome. And these are normal conditions that people can have, and the people around them say no.
It's worrying to hear that almost people are saying they'd rather have an exorcism than any kind of form of counselling.
Yeah, well, because again, the counselling for some people would say, oh, well, this is about me fixing me.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that in the sense that, oh, well, I've broken my leg. I better go to rehabilitation on my leg, and people can handle that. But we're so blame focused with mental health that sadly we push it all on ourselves. And so, yeah, the idea of it could be somebody out there who's causing this can be quite preferable in some ways. But then, of course, you go through the exorcism and it could maybe work as a placebo potentially, but then it hasn't dealt with the underlying issues. And so some people will find themselves going back and back and back again. I'm open to the possibility that some people are helped by exorcism, even if there's no demon involved. But I also think the risks of misdiagnosing people, and this happens a lot, even with children. I've read cases of families where the dad and the mum are maybe struggling at work, or maybe the dad has got an illness, and they've decided the reason why that's happening is because maybe the daughter has been cursed by a witch, and so we have to exorcise the spirit of this curse out of the daughter, and it's just horrible, because like blaming the devil for everything. So it's dangerous, and that's what the book's about. It's about the danger of misdiagnosing mental health illness as demonic. But the books always leave the door open to the possibility. But hey, what happens if there is a demon? And at the end of that, but it goes absolutely nuts. At the end, there's like demon possessed people all over the shop. It's pretty cool ending. Yeah, so it's pretty wild. But it always leaves the door open to say. Matt Hunter always says it's not real.
Yeah,
but he gets spooked out sometimes, and the other characters say no, it's absolutely real. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in that interplay between belief and non-belief.
It is interesting you say about the demon, because there was a period when the ghost TV shows in America suddenly had this whole thing about wherever they went, they were getting demons. And I noticed on the paranormal investigations that I run for the public that suddenly out of the blue, we were suddenly getting, oh no, it's a demon, it's a demon, it's a demon. And it was like, what? We've been here for 10 years. We've never had anything slightly even sinister, let alone demonic. And then suddenly it's demon, everything labeled demon. It was like, no. Yeah. And it was almost become trendy to say, oh, it must be demon, must be demon.
Yeah. And a lot of that has been informed by popular culture. And you have to also remember that, and this might sound obvious, but it's not, people don't always make the connections. Like making films is expensive. And so there are certain types of films that are cheaper to make than others. So it's cheaper to make a zombie film and a demonic possession film because the makeup involved is quite minimal. You know, you can make someone look like a zombie and make someone look like a possessed person quite easily with just, you know, a bit of black stuff put under their eyes or whatever and get them swearing and spitting on the cross or whatever. Whereas making a werewolf movie is much more expensive because you have to have some sort of transformation, you have to have a suit. And so werewolf movies are not as popular because they're expensive to make. So in the world of kind of indie cinema and the explosion of indie horror in the last few years, you've seen a growth in films that are not that expensive to make. And so demon possession films and zombie films and just like general kind of stabby murder type films are really popular. And once they get into the zeitgeist, people start viewing the world through those lenses. And so the ghost hunting shows start picking up on this, like, you know, this is about demons and, you know, the devil is attacking. And this is why I find it ironic that Christians are so against paranormal communities and horror films, because they are actually some of the few places in society that kind of still have a Christian-y religious type of worldview, because they're talking about good and evil spirits and life after death. It's an inherently kind of almost like you could almost say, I would say, you know, these days people who are interested in the paranormal, for many, it's a religion in itself. It's a resurgence of kind of Victorian spiritualism, where people are waving around their sacred objects, but it's not a cross. It's an EMF meter or something. And these are the vehicles through which we can connect with a kind of cosmic force. And to me, I don't see that as, so you people are nasty and you're plugging into Satan. I'm like, how interesting. They're people searching for something, just as I'm searching for something. And so I kind of feel a kinship with them. But I suppose I found an answer which makes sense to me.
I've often heard people have criticized paranormal investigation, particularly ghost hunting, saying that they are opening themselves up to demonic possession, in as much as you keep touching spirits that might be malevolent, and they will associate themselves with you, connect with you in whatever way, and obviously, ultimately, possess you. Do you hold with that at all, or do you think we all naturally have our own intrinsic safety measures that isn't happening all the time?
I think it's possible, and I have heard, you know, plenty of cases of people who feel like they've picked something up, as it were, in a certain location. But I suppose the older I get, the more cynical I get, and the thought that, you know, often there is this the imagination is at work, and so that people who believe like something bad has followed them home are going to look for kind of confirmation bias, and anything that's spooky or goes wrong, they'll say, well, that's what it is. And I suppose the older I'm getting, the less scared I am of the paranormal, and just the more intrigued I am by it. But I still leave the possibility open. Like an example would be, let me just show you something. One sec.
Are you going to get possessed on TV? Is this a live possession? What's to do with the exorcism?
So an example would be, that reminded me a few months ago that I still am quite spooked out by the supernatural, is this arrived in my through the door, and there was I don't know if you can see that very well. Hang on a minute. Yeah, this thing arrived, and it was in a box, and the postman just handed it over, and I didn't know what it was, and it was rattling inside, and it came with a letter, and it said it was from a family who said that they lived in a farmhouse, and they found this thing, which they described as a witch bottle, and they found this thing in the farm, and they discovered it. And then since they found it, weird things have been happening in their house, and their cat had gone missing, and they were seeing sort of apparitions at the bottom of the stairs and stuff. And I write a monthly column in the Fortean Times magazine, and so they decided that me being ordained and also being into this stuff, maybe I'd prefer to have it. So it arrived, and I was spooked out. And I was reminded that actually I do believe in the supernatural enough to be scared. And I got a bit scared about having this in the house, and I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I was also intrigued and excited. And then it turned out about 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I discovered that, I don't know if you know Richard Freeman, the cryptozoologist. Do you know him?
Yes.
You might
He's
met him.
been.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm friends with Richard, and he had got an artist to create this, and had sent it to me as a prank. So it turned out to be not true. But for a few weeks, I thought maybe it was real, and it taught me something. It taught me that I'm open-minded enough to still be potentially scared by the thought of curses and demons and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think most people are not locked down to one thing or the other. I don't think you have to be. I think kind of in some ways.
I love that story.
Yeah, it is cool. And I'll tell you what was really weird, and this wasn't Richard's fault, but on the day this came, and I posted this on Twitter, I was cleaning and I dropped a knife, a very sharp knife on the floor, and it fell on the floor, and when it hit the floor of the kitchen, it span like this, like on the floor, and I grabbed my phone and I took a video of it and was like, that's weird. But I was convinced it was just a weird act of physics, but it's never happened again. But that happened, and then the doorbell went ding dong, and this arrived with this letter. So you can see that for a little while, and I get worried because I've got a family, I've got 2 young kids, and so I was thinking, could my interests ever put them at risk? But those are only small doubts. On the whole, I'm quite chilled out about this sort of thing.
Did you ever feel as if, how can I put this politely, your authority, your linkage, you could then will that to go, I'm going to protect this and put a bubble around it?
Well, I'm not really a big believer in the idea of hierarchy within churches or within just general people. So the point of Christianity is supposed to say there is no divide. So, when Jesus dies, there's this bit when the temple curtain gets torn in two from the top to the bottom. And it's this symbol of saying, like, what used to be the holiest of holies and only the priest could go in. When Jesus died, it rips that open and everyone's got equal access. Nobody's more special than anyone else. And so I don't believe for a second that, I've been ordained and I've prayed a few times in my life and I know a few Bible stories, so I'm locked and loaded, ready to fight the devil. I think anybody, has instant access to, if God exists, of course, he might not exist. I'm open to that. I'm open to the possibility that he doesn't. But I think he probably does. And so I think anyone has access to that power, because I think God's loving and kind and wants to help us. So yes, I don't think I was in a better position to deal with a potential demonic.
You weren't there with the holy water, ready to.
No, I wasn't. But I have had experiences where that, like in the Frighteners, the book, there's things in this book which it looks at true crime and zombies, and I go hunting werewolves in Hull, and I get chased by zombies in an underground nuclear bunker in Essex. There's all this wild Louis Theroux style stuff going on in there. But there's a chapter specifically on the supernatural and why people are drawn to it. And I stayed in a haunted hotel where I was actually there because I was doing a true crimey thing and then a werewolf thing in the same hotel. It was a crazy night.
Like you do.
But that night there was a woman had died by cutting her throat in one of the rooms, and I'd been told this story. And that night, when I got back to the hotel after the werewolf hunt, I got to my hotel room alone, and I realized, holy crap, the room she killed herself in is above mine. And I went to bed, and I have actually not been that scared in a paranormal situation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In my life. But I was, and I write about this in the book, I was proper nervous. I slept, I don't know what it was. It could have been just my mind. But then like 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the bath starting to run upstairs, and I'm like, well, okay, it's probably just some guy got a meeting tomorrow or whatever. He's running the bath. But the other part of my mind, the deepest ditch of the night mind, which is thinking anything is possible. I'm like, holy crap, what am I going to do if something comes in now? So I had all the lights on. I kept all my clothes on, and just in case something happened. And what I learned about myself and the paranormal in that chapter was that I'm very up for searching for ghosts and having a kind of Scooby-Doo style hunt or a serious hunt with fellow people, because if we see something as a group, we can verify with one another if what we saw was real or not. But I discovered I'm quite scared about being in a situation by myself, because my mind will not just assume, even if I saw a ghost in front of me, will not just assume I saw a ghost. It will say I've seen a ghost or I'm going insane. Like, I'm open to those two things. And that's not a very nice thing to think. Am I going insane? Did I really see it? Because I'm so blown open-minded, which is annoying. I'm open to both possibilities. But if me and you are there and you say, I saw it and I saw it too, that brings comfort, because I know the insanity bit is not likely. So that taught me a little bit about how, the open mind can sometimes lead to negatives in a way.
I find as a scientist, I'm always trying to sit on the fence, because I will make try and make non-objective statements. I'm trying to say something which can be scientifically proven and not just an opinion. And then sometimes people see that as a little open door to say, well, you're not quite sure what you think. It's like, well, I am, but I can't say what you want me to say, like categorically one way or the other. Something is a state.
Yeah.
So I'm sometimes the same in terms of like I'm open to possibilities, and sometimes you sit there going, cranking the mind, trying to work out what's going on, what you're seeing. Is like,
yes, yeah. And I personally think there's something quite healthy about realizing that you don't have to think of the world in a kind of fixed dualism where everything's one thing or the other. So you're either conservative or you're Labour, or you're a believer in ghosts or you're not, or you're a religious person or you're not a religious person, or a theist or an atheist. I think like life is way more interesting than that. And we're all on this kind of blended sort of journey. And I think some of the problems of the world happens because we're so fixated on this dualistic thinking. And so it's like, well, if you believe in science, then I believe in religion. So both of us are in two corners. And it's like, no, I totally am for science. I'm what you would call, I suppose, a theistic evolutionist. I believe in evolution. I believe in the Big Bang, but I'm intrigued by the possibility of there being an organizing principle behind evolution, potentially God. But the thought that you have to choose, or the thought that you have to never doubt is crazy. I've got atheist friends who say sometimes they listen to a piece of music and something shivers in them and they doubt their atheism. Me as a Christian, sometimes I wake up and I think it's possible. There's no such thing as God and this is all a big joke. But that's fine. That's just who we are. And I think being true to ourselves is sometimes being true to our contradictions. And that's what makes us wonderfully human. But sadly, people who are fixated with black and white thinking will say, well, you have to choose. Like, choose your side, choose your fighter. And to me, I think that's not a helpful way of looking at the world.
Peter, I could talk to you all day. And if
you
just leave on that mantra, don't be black and white.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm going to end with the little, I've got a second video of Creepy Cove as a little example. So Peter, thank you so much. We'll be back next week on Let's Talk with another subject matter. Hopefully Lara will be joining us. So Peter, for now, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, can I just add as well? Yeah. I did mention it before, but just to flag it up again is because it's maybe more relevant to you guys because you're into the paranormal. Like I say, Creepy Cove also has this Patreon thing, which is a kind of members thing where you can take part in. And that show specifically, it comes out every Tuesday and Thursday, and it explores the paranormal and weird stories. So the topics we look at are just strange and paranormal things, Fortean things, like the sort of stuff I do for the magazine. Fortean Times. But it also has a specific section which is called Holy Moly, which each week will explore weird, creepy, disturbing things that are going on in the Christian church. And there are weird things happening that sometimes don't make the news. So people might be of interest, might find that of interest.
Where can I find a link to that? From the Creepy Cove?
Yeah, if you go to patreon.com/Creepy Cove, or just go to Creepy Cove. So go to peterlaws.co.uk, you'll find it there. Or follow me on Twitter at RevPeterLaws. And we're a happy little band at Creepy Cove, but you'd be very, very welcome to come.
I've just been putting up there. Those people have been absolutely fascinated with what Dee was asking, are you into true crime also?
Yeah.
Quite possibly, I think, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say one of the chapters in this book is about murderabilia and about the murderabilia market, and so I kind of did a deep dive in investigating this scene where people will sell items that belong to the world's most sort of savage killers. And so in the first part of that book, I've got this like lock of Charles Manson's hair in my hand at a shop that was selling it for £40 for a strand, and I was trying to investigate this world where people are fascinated by true crime. But I find true crime also a bit like depressing. So I did that chapter first because I found it quite upsetting seeing so many crime photographs, and also because it's about real stuff. Like I briefly mentioned about a murder case in this book, which was linked to the paranormal, and then the book came out, and then about a month after the book came out, I got an email from the son of the victim saying, "We hear you're talking about my family. Like, what do you know about the murder?" Then I got, about 6 weeks later, I got an email from the son of the murderer who wanted to get in touch and ask me questions about it. And then the son of the police officer involved. And that kind of creeped me out a bit because this is real people dying. I'm kind of more comfortable in the fake world. But true crime is fascinating, and serial killers and all that sort of stuff. But it's sad as well because it's real people dying.
I'm very quickly putting up on your website, the Peter Laws podcast. You can see become a patron. I've also put a link onto the comment feed so people can follow that link. So I'm going to go along and become a patron of that, definitely. Because I am slightly addicted now, I have to say.
Wonderful.
Addicted to it.
Well,
I mentioned Lovecraft to you earlier. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that love.
But I've got it on my list. Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft.
It's very similar. I mean, that's an investigation into this mystery kind of thing, but it's very much the same sort of vibe. So I absolutely love it. So wonderful. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the comments.
I'll play this video and we'll see you again very soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. This is Peter Laws introducing you to the Creepy Cove Community Church podcast. It's a podcast presented in the style of a church service, but not just any church. Creepy Cove is a mysterious, haunted fishing town by the sea where every horror movie actually happened. Each show is an immersive audio experience where you attend the After Dark service. You'll meet the eccentric congregation. You'll get news from the town, including appearances from horror movie characters. There's a sermon to help you reflect and space for prayer and meditation. You'll also hear church music like you've never heard before. Treat this show as pure entertainment if you like, or as a genuine space for spiritual and philosophical pondering. It's designed to work as either. You don't have to be into church to come, and don't feel you have to listen to episodes in order either. Feel free to just scroll through and find a topic you like and drop right in. Or why not subscribe and get all new episodes sent straight to you for free? For more information, visit creepycove.com or find us at Twitter or Facebook. Just search for @CreepyCove. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you at the next service of the Creepy Cove Community Church.